Resuming debate, the honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Such a great honour to stand in this House representing the people of Nanaimo Ladysmith. And I must say I had really honestly believed that one of my responsibilities as Member of Parliament was to bring in a new electoral system. New Democrats, Liberals, Greens all campaigned with a commitment to change the voting system, and I truly believed, how naive of me, truly believed that this is something that this Parliament was going to be doing. And I feel very sad to be having to participate in this debate today that the Prime Minister misled Canadians when he promised to change the current voting system to make every vote count. So we've heard the history today. The Prime Minister promised repeatedly during the election campaign. He even appropriated Fair Vote's slogan of make every vote count. He repeated the commitment in the throne speech that he would take action to ensure that 2015 will be the last federal election conducted under the first-past-the-post voting system. I want to read you just a fraction of the mail that I am getting, which illustrates the depth of this disappointment. I read from Kimberly Krieger's letter. She's a constituent in Nanaimo. I am a constituent of yours from Nanaimo. I write to express my sense of disappointment. Disappointment does not begin to describe how I felt this morning after hearing that the Liberal Party has reneged on its promise of electoral reform. Betrayal comes somewhat closer. The government quite simply shirked their responsibility to make the policy changes they promised while trying to use Canadians as a scapegoat not to make difficult policy decisions. It is shameful. Our world is in turmoil because of a man who was not elected by a majority of voters in his nation. Canada deserves better than a system that would allow that. End quote. This was such a strong theme of our election campaign. On Vancouver Island, there was not a single all-candidates meeting that did not talk about changing the voting system. And I knew personally what an opportunity this was. While I was elected to Islands Trust Council, which is a regional government in my region, I was fortunate to be able to travel to Norway with a delegation of oil companies, government departments, provincial reps, local and Indigenous leaders, 30 of us Canadians who went to Norway to learn how they're managing their oil spill risk. But the lessons I learned there about democracy were stronger than anything. This was a country that elects more women than Canada, that elects more minorities. It has an Indigenous parliament embedded within its parliamentary system. Very diplomatic embassy people that were traveling with us let us know that decorum in the Norwegian parliament is something to aspire to. They said, we have seen your legislatures and your parliaments in Canada, and quote, ours is nothing like that. This is a country that governs cooperatively. Norway enacts policies for the common good. It does not have deep swings in ideology from one election to the next because the parties are elected together to cooperate together. There are shifts, of course, in those coalitions over time. Nobody would describe Norway as an unstable democracy. They elect more women. They have higher voter turnout, they have more diversity, their parliament represents the diversity of the country, and they are elected on a proportional representation system. I would have thought that this government, especially having got feedback from across the country, that they would continue to believe in innovation, they would continue to want to elevate the people of color, of minorities, of diversity, women to positions of decision-making. I would have thought that they would want to get higher voter turnout and more youth engagement. But no. Instead of reforming our outdated and unfair voting system to ensure that all Canadians are truly represented in Parliament, the Liberals decided instead to keep the current system because it benefits them. There's no other explanation. And especially disturbing to me has been the government's claim in the week since they broke their promise to claim that there's no consensus around electoral reform. So for one, during the election, 2/3 of Canadians voted for a party that promised to implement a form of proportional representation to make every vote count. During the work of the committee, 90% of the experts and 80% of the members of the public that testified called on the government to adopt a proportional electoral system. And then third, when the Liberals undermined the whole process by launching their ridiculous online My Democracy survey, they didn't even ask Canadians what kind of voting system they wanted. In my own riding, Nanaimo Ladysmith, I've received several thousand letters and emails on this matter. We convened a town hall session in the summertime, not an easy time to get people out to meetings, and not constructive of the government to leave it until summertime to initiate town halls. However, I'm very thankful. Almost 200 people came out to Vancouver Island University to a forum that was extremely well attended, very thoughtful. We got 84% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that a party's seat in Parliament should reflect the percentage of the votes that it wants. A supermajority of the constituents in Nanaimo Ladysmith that participated in that town hall and in our own survey and our mailing to every household, they all said that a majority said they prefer proportional representation and want to see the system change quickly but properly. They demonstrated strong support for taking action to change our voting system. Here's a quote that illustrates the kind of feedback that we got. This is from Barbara in Nanaimo. Quote, "I'm 78 years old. I voted in every election since I was eligible. I'd like to feel like I am represented at least once before I die." And New Democrats cooperated in this process. We tried again and again to help the government keep its promise to change the voting system and make every vote count. And this has been well documented in the debate today and in the record in the House. Proposing a proportional electoral committee, working with the government, trying to find ways to bring this speedily, even after the government let the issue languish for 8 months. Genuinely, we wanted this to win. We were happy for the government to get the credit. We genuinely wanted to change the voting system to make every vote count, because we know that this has worked again and again around the world. We have got every country that scores higher than Canada so far as gender equality in its parliament, every single one of them uses a form of proportional representation in order to get people elected. We have extremely stable governments. All of the Scandinavian countries, Germany, New Zealand, multiple examples of countries that have had multiple decades of experience with proportional representation. None of them would be described as fractious with strong right-wing radical elements. None of them would be described as unstable. And what is the cost of this broken promise? I'm hearing from a lot of young people that engaged in the election in good faith. They are feeling extremely cynical and saddened about the electoral process. I am very concerned that anybody else who might want to participate in a government consultation might say, why bother? I am encouraged by the numbers on the online petition. I checked right before my speech started. I bet that during the course of this speech, it has clicked into the 95,000 count, an astonishing response from Canadians asking that the government keep its promise and change the voting system to make every vote count. On Sunday, I was honored to stand on the steps of Parliament with many young Canadians in a day of action to call for democratic reform, and I will be out again Saturday in front of Parliament 2 o'clock for a national day of action. This is happening across the country. People are calling out strongly for the government to keep its word, and for the benefit of all Canadians, for democracy, for minorities, for women, for young Canadians, I implore the government to reconsider its great betrayal of its election promise, its great betrayal of Canadians, and please make every vote count.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Vancouver Quadra.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I take a strong exception to this resolution that is being debated today. In this text, that the government misled Canadians on its platform and throne speech commitment, and that is absolutely not my experience, Mr. Speaker. The intention of the Prime Minister was genuine. I was part of a small group of members of Parliament that were invited to sit with the Prime Minister in his own home as the Liberal leader and discuss this matter in a way that was real, genuine, and with interest all around the table. The Prime Minister is exceedingly committed to a cooperative Parliament, and we've seen the benefits of that. We've seen the benefits of the change in tone. We've seen the empowerment of parliamentarians at committees. We've seen Senate reform that is completely changing the partisan, divisive nature of the Senate. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith, what evidence does she have that there was intention to mislead Canadians on this platform commitment? And I would secondly like to ask if this member who campaigned on balancing the budget, given the fact that there was
Sorry, the honourable member for Nanaimo Ladysmith.
I think I have the floor, right, Mr. Speaker? Yeah, thank you very much. So I would urge the member to follow the lead of her fellow member of Parliament, Liberal from the Kelowna Lake country, who says that partly because he negotiated with a member of the Green Party not to be on the ballot, that he says he won because of his electoral reform promise, and he has apologized to his constituents and voters for the government breaking the promise. I cannot pretend to look inside the Prime Minister's mind. The member is quite right. I've never met him or been invited to his dinner table. But from anybody on the outside, a solemn promise that right up until December was still being repeated, hand on heart, by the Prime Minister, to saying this will be the last election. He didn't say, I will consult and I will consider it and I will weigh it. People came out to vote for his party on the basis of that solemn promise, and I could have read you 20 more heartfelt letters that say exactly that. So the problem here today is an election platform on which this Prime Minister and this government was elected has been dishonored and thrown away in I would say, an extremely cynical way. And I think the government is wrong. I think they've broken faith with voters, and I think that they would do very well to reconsider their ill-advised decision.